What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining me. As always, it is much appreciated. The 100th episode of the Nick Cattle Show happening today. We're going to go long for you. We're going to go to an hour with all of you. I can't say enough. I appreciate every single one of you, especially all of the regulars. You've kept me sane since moving back to New England without a full-time job, and for that, I thank you. And I'm happy to be back home here in Foxborough. Flew back from Tampa yesterday, back in the usual studio, and can't wait to get going. Let's start with some news this morning. The Patriots have found their special teams coordinator. Jeremy Springer is the new special teams head honcho for the Patriots. He was the second pick for Gerard Mayo and company. Of course, we know that the Patriots wanted to hire Marquise Williams, who ended up staying in Atlanta. That is understandable. Marquise Williams has 4 children. Did not want to uproot the family if he didn't have to. New Falcons head coach Raheem Morris wanted to keep Williams, so Williams stayed in Atlanta. So the second guy on the list was Springer. So Mayo decides to make him the new special teams coordinator. Now, what is his background? Couple of things here. He was the assistant special teams coach for the Rams the last 2 seasons. I had to go to LinkedIn. This is no joke. I went to LinkedIn, which Jeremy Springer is on. You can do this at home if you'd like. I went to LinkedIn to do some research on Springer and his background. He was the quality control special teams and tight ends coach at Texas A&M from the 2015 season through the 2017 season. He was the special teams coordinator at the University of Arizona from the 2018 season to the 2020 season. He was an assistant coach, quote unquote, at Marshall for the 2021 season. And then he went to LA to coach under Sean McVay as the assistant special teams coach in 22 and 23. Anthony Licciardi wrote about LA's special teams at Sports Illustrated a couple of weeks ago when it came out that Springer was interviewing with the Patriots. And here's what he had to say. The Rams special teams ranked dead last. And the difference between them and the Green Bay Packers, the 31st ranked team, and this is in DVOA, is similar to the difference between Green Bay and the Chiefs, who finished 6th, i.e., the Rams special teams was absolutely brutal, according to DVOA. And Jeremy Springer, of course, was the assistant special teams coordinator. There were 2 other guys that were involved with special teams with LA. So you would look at this and say that Springer was really the 3rd guy in the pecking order. So the special teams in the Rams organization last year was not very good. However, Licciardi writes that doesn't and should not disqualify Springer. The Rams shuffled between kickers and had a rookie punter. His track record is more encouraging than this past season suggests. So Licciardi from Sports Illustrated writes that, yes, the Rams special teams this past year was brutal, but don't hang that on Springer. The kicking situation was a disaster. They had a rookie punter. And if you look at his resume from his college days, it would tell you that he's an up-and-coming special teams coordinator. So that's what we know about Springer. Now, Andrew Callahan of the Boston Herald did a fantastic job. He tracked down an interview in 2020 with Springer. He said, first things first, have a lot of passion and energy. You're going to hear me say it a lot. I want guys to come out there and have fun with it. I don't want to be that stagnant group where people are quiet and don't want to be here. I want to make it fun for them. A lot of guys don't come here to play special teams. Let's just be honest. They come here to play offense and defense. Maybe they were the best player at their high school. They come here, they've got to make a role for themselves. I try to make them get involved a little more through my presentations, through my actions every day. I want to make it fun for the guys. So again, we talk about this coaching staff that Mayo is putting together. And one of the top priorities is connection with the players, connection with the younger generation. We talked about it with DeMarcus Covington and his promotion. Now we talk about it with Springer and special teams. We will get to offensive coordinator in a minute, just covering the breaking news this morning that the Pats have a new special teams coordinator. So this connection with the players, this link to the players, this having fun, the emotional connection with the younger generation, this is something we keep hearing from Mayo and the guys that he is bringing onto this staff or promoting within the staff. It's a common theme. What also is a common theme, which we've talked about, is youth. Mayo is trying to target younger coaches. It's obvious that he believes that younger coaches have a better opportunity and more of a probability of connecting with this generation of NFL players than guys that have been around the league for 10, 15, 20 years. Because when you look at Springer, he graduated college. I don't know how many of you have graduated college more recent than Springer. I certainly haven't. Springer graduated in 2011. So he's in his mid-30s. So Gerard Mayo's 37. Covington is 34. Springer is in his mid-30s. So you start to see the theme of this coaching staff. Young, energetic, vibrant, communicators with the younger generation. Energy. That's what Mayo is bringing to this staff. And can we all just say, goodbye to Joe Judge and Cam Acord. Deuces. Happy to see you go. It truly is amazing. I tweeted this, and I'll get to the OC search and whether or not we should be panicked in a minute. I just want to end on this note. I posted this at Nick C Radio on Twitter/X. If you want to follow me, again, it's at Nick C Radio. It truly is amazing that the Patriots had 3 coaches devoted to special teams. They had 6 or 7 roster spots devoted to coverage. They moved up in the 4th round to draft a kicker, and they drafted their punter. We're talking about a ton of resources through free agency and the draft, paying 3 coaches, and their special teams were as bad as they were this past year. It's truly, truly amazing. All right, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Every single thumb counts. Every like matters. We're trying to smash this YouTube algorithm. Our 100th episode, we go live Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. I appreciate every single one of you. So give us that like, that thumbs up, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter/X. Don't forget to comment. I see many of you commenting. I'll get to them in a few minutes. And don't forget to subscribe. Trying to hit 1,750 subscriptions by Valentine's Day. We are about 100 away. So if you haven't subscribed yet, join the family, join the conversation. Speaking of family, Amy Harriman, who I call my sister, but really isn't my sister, but she's my sister. She jumps in. Amy, you didn't have to send me a super chat. Could have just bought me a drink at the bar the next time we hang out. Yay, Nick, congrats on 100 episodes. Keep going and offering an intelligent alternative to the pandering and echo chambers in New England media. Amy, I appreciate you. I love you personally. And I appreciate the super chat that you sent. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to do things differently. We're trying to do things a little bit differently than some other content that you might watch or listen to here in New England. That is the priority. All right, let's get to some of your chats before we get into the offensive coordinator situation and whether or not we should be panicked. Should we be panicked? We'll see. James jumps in and says, I'm very concerned about the recruitment. Josh McDaniels is a last-ditch effort to hire at OC, not a great start to the Mayo era. Is that true? Is this a last-ditch effort? Is this whole search going badly already? Aaron says, are any of us surprised that nobody wants the OC job in New England? So let's get into this. We should mention that the Patriots, Gerard Mayo brought in Jeremy Springer, who was just hired as the special teams coordinator. They brought him in over the weekend at the same time they brought Nick Caley in. Nick Caley had a sit-down interview in person. Albert Breer reported, we had this on Monday's podcast, that on Sunday night, the brass was going to sit down with Caley. You would imagine the brass also sat down with Springer. So Springer gets the special teams job. We haven't heard yet that Nick Caley is getting the OC job. Of course, we've heard from multiple people at this point, we've heard that Nick Caley is the guy who is seen as the favorite to be the offensive coordinator. He's the leader in the clubhouse. So Caley has yet to be announced as the guy. The Patriots just interviewed Luke Getsy, who most recently was in Chicago with Justin Fields as OC of the Bears. Getsy just got an in-person interview. And it's interesting because, Mark Daniels quote tweeted somebody by the name of Brent Valley, who mentioned that Caley and Getsy were at Akron at the same time, which is fascinating. As Daniels pointed out, in 2007, Caley and Getsy were both graduate assistants at Akron. That makes you wonder, doesn't it? You have Luke Getsy, who has experience calling plays, offensive coordinator, did it for multiple years in Chicago. He has this relationship with Nick Caley. Nick Caley has a relationship with ownership, obviously, and many of the coaches here in New England. If you start putting two and two together, it would make some sense that Nick Caley and Luke Getsy would work together because of that relationship going back 15, 16 years ago. Is this a scenario? I mentioned on a podcast earlier this week the idea that, hey, maybe you have Josh McDaniels above somebody like Nick Caley, have McDaniels be the assistant head coach and really kind of look at the bigger picture offensively and help with certain scenarios while Caley gets his feet wet calling plays. Well, now you wonder, are they thinking of a structure with Getsy and Caley instead of McDaniels and Caley? Or are we talking about all three? Are we talking about McDaniels, Getsy, and Caley? All three guys on the offensive side of the football. It'd be a very, very interesting dynamic. A lot of egos and personalities would have to be subjugated to make sure that kind of structure would work. So is it time? Is it time, with that background information, the latest on the offensive coordinator search, is it time for us to be panicked? Should you be panicked? Should I be panicked? Should the Patriots be panicked? Gerard Johnson, last night we found out he's staying in Houston. He interviewed for the OC job. Of course, Zach Robinson decided to stay in Atlanta. Am I panicked? Not yet. Not yet. I am not panicked. Let's look at what's happened here. Now, I can eventually get panicked, more on that in a minute or two. But right now, today, January 31st, on this hump day, am I panicked? I am not panicked. Zach Robinson stayed with Raheem Morris. Him going to Atlanta with Morris is not a surprise. We discussed that likely happening before it happened. So the fact that Robinson went to Atlanta, I don't think that's an indictment on the Patriots or the Patriots search or Gerard Mayo. I think that is Zach Robinson sticking with one of his friends. Again, it's a relationship business. Robinson is friends with Morris. They've coached together, so Robinson goes with Morris to Atlanta. I don't think that says anything about the Patriots. I honestly don't. I think that speaks volumes of the relationship between two coaches. So Robinson goes to Atlanta. Dan Pitcher staying in Cincinnati is not a surprise. If you're a pitcher, why would you leave Cincinnati other than, hey, I get to call plays? Now, that's what Pitcher was looking at, right? If, let's say, he was interested in the Patriots job. He took the interview. Let's say he was legitimately interested in being the next OC for Mayo. The decision for Pitcher was, do I stay in Cincinnati, continue to learn under Zach Taylor, work with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase at wide receiver, Mixon at running back. I have all of these weapons, and I'm still kind of learning on the job here. And I'm going to be an OC sooner rather than later as far as calling plays. I don't have that responsibility in Cincinnati, but am I in a rush to leave this situation with the Bengals when I just saw the offensive coordinator for the Bengals, who wasn't calling plays, get a head coaching job? Brian Callahan was just signed as a head coach. So if you're a pitcher, you're looking at that and you're saying, wait a minute, Callahan didn't need play calling experience to get the head coaching job. Mike McDaniel in Miami didn't need play calling experience to get the head coaching job. So which place right now is better suited to build up my reputation throughout the NFL? Is it Cincinnati with Joe Burrow or the New England Patriots with quarterback X? So Pitcher staying in Cincinnati makes sense. These are logical things. Shane Waldron was at near the top of my list when we talked about offensive coordinator possibilities going back weeks ago. Waldron decides to go to Chicago. Again, if you're Waldron and you're looking at the Patriots gig, you don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Waldron knows in Chicago it's either going to be Justin Fields or Caleb Williams, right? He knows he has the number one pick. And I'm sure they had the conversation during the interview, who the hell is going to be the quarterback? I'm pretty confident that conversation happened. So Waldron going to the Bears with a much steadier vision of who's going to be the quarterback, that made sense. So all of this is logical. All of this tells us that relationships matter. There are jobs out there that are better than the Patriots offensive coordinator position, which we should all know because of how this was left by Bill Belichick and even some of the guys that are still in the front office. We don't know who made, exactly which pitch to who and who was a big fan of Juju Smith-Schuster, for example. Bill had the final call. So Bill left this offense in just a terrible spot. We've talked about this. If you're a prospective OC and you're looking, you don't know who the quarterback is. Your offensive line is in shambles without the 2 starting offensive tackles. You don't have a tight end on the roster. You have 1 running back, Ramondre Stevenson. You don't have a wide receiver 1. So I don't think this is a case of, man, nobody wants to coach with Mayo, or, man, Mayo is screwing this up badly. I honestly don't believe that. I think it's the fact that relationships matter, better jobs are out there, and Mayo is trying to find somebody that wants the gig and makes sense. And Nick Caley could be that guy. Now, when will I get panicked? When will I start to get very concerned? I think we need to get there by this weekend, if not early next week. I will say if they don't have an offensive coordinator by Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that's when we start to look at this and get concerned. And we get concerned about their indecisiveness because they've interviewed all of the people they need to interview. They've had second interviews with Getsy and Caley. I have to imagine that Getsy and Caley, either as a tag team combination, shout out to the Judgment Day, or one of those 2 guys is going to get the job. That's what I would have to imagine. It's been reported about Caley. Getsy, of course, as we talked about, has that relationship with Caley. So if this isn't figured out by Monday or Tuesday of next week, then that tells me they're not sold on the guys that they've talked to. They're not sold on Nick Caley, even though they've had 2 interviews with him. They're not sold on Luke Getsy, even though they've had 2 interviews with him now. Both guys had at least 1 in-person interview with the organization. So that would tell me Getsy, Caley did not win over anybody in the room with the interviews they had, which leads you to wonder what the hell is next? What's going to happen? And do they have somebody out there that actually wants to take the job, that is actually interested in the job? Do they have somebody? They've gone through a roll call of people. And the reason why you've got to get this thing done, in my estimation, by early next week is because the NFL calendar is going. It's a rolling. Tick-tock, tick-tock. You've got to figure out your staff. What are you doing at offensive line? It doesn't sound like Adrian Clem is going to return. So who is your offensive line coach? One of the most important hires the Patriots need to make beyond the OC is the O-line coach, given the situation that's happening with the big guys up front. So who's your offensive line coach? Who's your wide receivers coach? You've got to get the staff together. Who's your tight ends coach? Who's calling plays? You have to get this offensive staff together sooner rather than later. And I'd like them to start doing that over the weekend and into early next week. Free agency, which we'll talk about in a minute, is 5 to 6 weeks away. So you have to put this staff together. The staff then knows what kind of players they want. They get with the front office, and now you know who you're targeting. What types of players do we want with this offense? I'll give you an example. Sean McVay runs a lot of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, right? Condensed formations, pre-snap motion. We've talked about it. And his receivers, they tend to be bigger and they tend to block well. So if you're running a Sean McVay offense, then you need to target wide receivers that have those kinds of credentials and have that kind of resume. Completely different than the kind of wide receivers that you're looking at with the Earhart-Perkins offense. So this kind of all is a domino effect. You've got a staff, Then you've got to get into free agency and say, who do we want in free agency? What types of players fit this offensive scheme that this staff wants to run? And then the scouts after free agency, they are obviously targeting guys in the draft that fit the offense. Who are we going to draft that fits this offense best? What kind of quarterback do you want to run what kind of offense? All of these are the questions that have to begin getting answered within the next week or so. So if we get to Monday, Tuesday, early next week, and we have no offensive coordinator and we have no idea about this offensive staff, I think at that point, we should start to have a little bit of concern. And I think if somebody's panicked, I would understand. I would understand you being panicked. All right, we'll talk about a probable scenario in a minute. Don't forget, though, give us that thumbs up. Every like means the world to me and to this show. This is the 100th episode of the Nick Cattle Show. And I'll tell you, we would not have hit 100 if it wasn't for you. All of you that have watched, that have listened, that have commented, that have subscribed, trying to get to 1,750 YouTube subscriptions by Valentine's Day. All of you, all of that traffic, all of that interaction is what makes the numbers go up. So if you can take that second, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter/X. Don't forget Spotify, Apple Pods. You can rate and review and also comment. One thing here that I want to throw out is, of course, the Super Chats. We got a lot of comments coming in. If you want to jump the line, then you send a Super Chat. You can contribute to the show monetarily, financially, but also you can get your question, your comment in front of everybody else. So send that Super Chat. That is always very much appreciated. Just had one come in. Alan says, wanting to be an OC for that Patriots offense would be like wanting to be a personal stylist for Bill Belichick. It would be rough. It would be rough. I would say it's a little bit easier, though, being a personal stylist for Belichick because you pretty much know what he likes. This offense is an unknown. There's so many unpredictables. So I'm not really, surprised. We've talked about some of the other things. The idea that Gerard Mayo, he doesn't have a huge network. He's relying on ownership and others in the front office to kind of guide this search. So going through all of the names, it doesn't really surprise me. It doesn't really surprise me. JN jumps in and says, I wouldn't hate Kraft getting involved to get Josh to come back. In 2021, he got a rookie quarterback, new wide receivers, new tight ends to be the sixth best offense in the NFL, basically what the Pats are up against in 2024. I've said this. I don't hate the idea of McDaniels returning, but I want to know if he's willing, able, capable of evolving this offense and not relying on the same old, same old. Now, he showed the ability to evolve with Cam Newton. He got the most out of Cam than anybody could have gotten out of Cam. He was able to adapt with Jacoby Brissett on short notice during Brady's suspension years ago. He got the most out of Jimmy Garoppolo in that short stint with the Patriots. He got Mac to play well in his rookie season, given a lot of questions about, the talent around Mac Jones and what they were doing. So, look, McDaniels, there are a lot of pros. As much as people, hate the idea of bringing somebody back and just having a lot of this coaching staff look the same, there are a lot of check marks next to McDaniels. He's run an offense for a long time. He can be that head coach of the offense. He is considered a top 5 to 10 offensive coordinator in football. He is somebody that understands the market. He understands the ownership. He knows Gerard Mayo, so he has that kind of relationship. I don't know if it's a close relationship or not, but he's worked with Mayo before. So there are lots of pros with McDaniels, and it actually makes sense to look at Josh McDaniels, especially when you look at the other names that are involved here, guys that have never called plays before. It's a very difficult position to be in walking into 2024 with a lot of new pieces on the offensive side. And you're going to trust somebody, maybe, that's never called plays before. You're going to have a rookie defensive coordinator. You have a rookie special teams coordinator. You're going to have a rookie head coach. It's going to be a lot to ask a rookie offensive coordinator who's never called plays before to join the family. All right, a couple of more super chats here on the OC situation. Kelso jumps in and says, I still have a bad feeling about the lack of attention to hiring a GM, simple common sense, and good management practice. Well, here's what I'll say, Kelso. They haven't named a GM, but I believe that Elliott Wolf is the guy. I believe Elliott Wolf is the guy who's going to lead this personnel at least for the next few months. Matt Groh is down in the Senior Bowl. That's Matt Groh's job by definition, right? He's going to be looking at this, and he's going to be scouting all the talent at the Senior Bowl like he's done in past years. He's going to continue to do what he's been doing. But who is back here with Mayo? Wolf. Wolf is back here with Mayo in New England, interviewing these offensive coordinator guys, and also obviously interviewing Jeremy Springer for the eventual gig as the special teams coordinator. And I think that tells us a decent amount here. The fact that Elliott Wolf is working hand in hand with the head coach while Matt Groh is down in Alabama, scouting, I think that tells us that Wolf is the leader in the clubhouse to be the GM of this team. And I've said it. I wouldn't hate it. Elliott Wolf is widely respected throughout football. Ron Wolf's son from the Green Bay days. He has worked with multiple NFL teams before he got to New England. He is not a Belichick guy. He's not a Belichick loyalist. He has a big-time network throughout the league. He knows a ton of agents. He has worked with the free agents, negotiations over the last couple of years with the Patriots. That has not been Groh. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Elliott Wolf if he's the guy. Again, we have to continue to say this, and I know it might get irritating for people, but I'm just reminding everybody, relationships matter. And when Gerard Mayo was the internal promotion, the number one priority to find the GM, and I would have hired the GM first. I would have done a head coach search. I was going to say cast a wide net at head coach. They didn't cast a net at all. I would have casted a wide net at head coach and interviewed people. I would not have given this Gerard Mayo succession plan. I would not have put that on paper the way that they did, because I think it really put them in the corner. But all of that is past now, and we're dealing with the reality. And the reality is Gerard Mayo is your head coach. And as soon as you promoted Mayo, you need to have somebody who's worked with Mayo or has a relationship with Mayo. And they still may bring in somebody like Trey Brown from the outside in Cincinnati to help. But you needed somebody who Mayo trusts. You need that synergy between head coach and GM. They have to have the same vision. They have to be able to communicate. So when you made that call, Mayo the head coach, and you decided to do that before going through a GM search and bringing somebody in from the outside, as soon as you made that call, it was likely that a number of the guys in the front office that have been there with Mayo over the last 4 or 5 years were going to stay in the front office. That's just a reality. And a lot of the guys, by the way, that people have talked about, and I've talked about, they're not even really getting interviews. Adam Peters is one of 2 guys that have gotten hired during this cycle that were brought up as studs and possible guys that Robert Kraft should look at, right? So it was Peters, and it was, I'm forgetting his last name, Baltimore Ravens, just went to the Chargers. Is it Hotze? Something along those lines. You know who I'm talking about. Those 2 guys were mentioned. So when you look at all these other names, the Trey Browns of the world, Reganzis of the world, some of the former Patriots, GMs and front office personnel like Dimitroff and, Pioli and John Robinson, none of those guys have gotten jobs. So we always have to remember, it's like the head coaching conversation. How many of us thought that Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick would not be a head coach by this time? Pretty much none of us. When we went into this hiring cycle, it was Ben Johnson, number one. He was going to get a job. He was going to get paid. He was the number one target. He's going back to Detroit. Bobby Slowick, he's done a great job in Houston. He's the sexy name. He's catching fire. He's going to be a head coach. going back to Houston. So a lot of the names that we hear, let's not forget, we're hearing those names because of agents. We are hearing a lot of those names because of relationships with the media. So nobody knows if Elliott Wolf is better or worse than Adam Peters. Nobody knows until the guys do the job. So I don't care about Elliott Wolf being named GM. If he's doing the job right now, I couldn't care less with them publicly coming out and saying, well, he's the GM. Now, I do think it's important that we need some transparency and know who is calling the shots. If it is Elliott Wolf, then I don't care about the title, but we should know who's making these decisions. This is a huge offseason. And Robert Kraft told us that the person would be the pick. The pick would be made before key decisions had to be resolved. So that tells me you absolutely need somebody's name out there as the top dog helping Mayo with these decisions. You need that name out there before free agency because Robert Kraft told us publicly. My freaking word. Charlie. A $100 super chat from Charlie. Means the world to me, man. I mean, that is your hard-earned money that you're sending to me because of what we do here. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Every single one of you that have watched and listened have kept me sane through this time. It was a very difficult decision to leave Sacramento because I was doing a job that I love. And we were very successful out there doing it. Came back for family and came back with no assurances of any job. Have no job right now, right? So you guys have kept me going. And I can't say enough about that. And Charlie has been at the front of the line. He has sent multiple super chats, and this one just goes above and beyond. Congrats on 100, Nick. My favorite local sports podcast by far. Thank you for your hard work. Charlie, thank you, man. And the fact that you're willing to send that like you sent that, again, means the world to me. The absolute world to me. So, the idea of the offensive coordinator, Getsy and Kaylee having a relationship, McDaniels having a relationship with Kaylee, could all three of those guys be involved? I think it's possible. Could two of those three guys be involved? I'm at the point where I'm looking at this as being probable. Honestly, I think that we're going to see, one of the three, two of the three, or all three. That's what I would put my money on. Throwing it out there. But that's what I would put my money on. I would put my money on Getsy, Kaylee, McDaniels, one, two, or all three of those guys being involved with your offense in 2024. Robert Hart jumps in, says, at this point, McDaniels' best case scenario. Proven, doesn't mind living in Massachusetts. Gross. Friendly with the owner, has relationship with Mayo. Checks a lot of boxes, as I've said. And I know a lot of people would not be happy with it because he coached with Belichick and all of that. And that's one of the cons, right? One of the cons is old school offense. Is he going to want to run the same old offensively? Can you find a young quarterback that can run that system appropriately? And also, he's a Belichick guy. And how would that dynamic work? I would imagine that he'd just be happy to have a job. Phenom says, yes, panic. Okay. What would I do if I was panicking? Would I get up and run around the room? Is that what I would do? Brian Moniz jumps in, says, if McDaniels is back, we are in trouble. Also, happy 100. Yes, the 100th episode of the Nick Cattle Show. We are going long. We're just halfway through this puppy. We've got free agency to talk about. We've got the draft to talk about. And I'm going to slide in some Boston Celtics talk by the end of this podcast because I love talking Celtics, and we've spent almost all of our time dedicated to the Patriots the last several weeks because they have been the news. Daniel Dominguez, I've been panicking, and I think Nick Kaylee deserves a shot. Like the idea of Nick, even as long as we change the playbook to the West Coast offense. Let's go. Another name that I have mentioned is Eric Bieniemy, and you wonder, Bieniemy has not been interviewed by the Patriots. I haven't seen Bieniemy's name anywhere. I don't know what that tells us. I do think it's significant that I haven't seen Washington interviewing Bieniemy for the head coaching job. And that could tell you something. And let's not forget that Bieniemy, he's known as a pretty tough coach. And he's also, again, I don't want to go the ageism route, but Gerard Mayo is filling his staff with a bunch of mid-30s dudes. Mid to late 30s is what he's looking at. Bieniemy is in his mid-50s. So I don't know if Bieniemy is the fit. All right, don't forget to give us that like, thumbs up. Every thumb counts. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, especially YouTube. If you haven't liked this show just yet, we're on episode 100. Hit that like button, that little thumbs up. Also, while you're here, subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,750 subscriptions by Valentine's Day. Let's get to free agency. And I don't want to talk about the rest of the league. And if you want to weigh in on the offensive coordinator thing, feel free again. You can send a super chat and jump the front of the line. That's the easiest way I get to see your comment or question. It's by sending a super chat. So continue to throw your comments in there about the OC situation and whether or not you're panicked. But I did want to talk about free agency. And I want to start here. I want to start with the Patriots free agents, because that's really the first decision that you have to make. How many of these guys do you want to retain? Free agency is on March 13th, 4 p.m. Eastern. Free agency, 4 p.m. Eastern, March 13th. We know the Patriots have roughly 1/3 of their team walking into free agency. And the first question I would ask is, what will be Gerard Mayo's approach here in free agency? We know that Mayo is on the defensive side. He's a defensive guy. Will he have an affinity for the defensive players that he's worked with that are going into free agency? Will he have an affinity for those guys to the point where he wants to bring a number of them back? How much does the personal relationship with Mayo mean in this free agency? And does Mayo look at some of these guys and say, I can get even more out of them? For example, Kyle Duggar. Phil Perry posted this yesterday. Duggar is now being represented by the One of One agency. So Duggar changed agents. Andrew Callahan followed that up by posting, Duggar explored switching agents last year and pulls the trigger now. Callahan wrote, I have no predictions on his free agency, but Duggar's new agency has a history of re-signing Patriots defensive backs. Jonathan Jones, Devin McCourty, Jason McCourty, Daron Harmon, and more. And Duggar has expressed a desire to stay. Does Mayo look at Duggar and say to himself, this guy could be an absolute freaking stud if we just deploy him the right way? If we play him in the box, instead of screwing around and trying to force him to play deep at free safety, if we keep Duggar and we put him in a better position to succeed, he's really, really good. And I don't want to lose that guy. Is that how Mayo is looking at this? So what I want to ask you is your priority list. Who do you want to see return? Who's number one on your list? 2, 3, 4, 5, because the Patriots have a slew of free agents. Which guys do you want back? What would be your priority list? If you're Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo, you're sitting there right now and you're done with the interviews for the day, and now your focus has shifted to free agency, and you're looking at this roster. Which guys do you want back and why? Throw your comments in. Again, best shot that I have to see the comment is sending a super chat, because there are so many comments to work through. It's very difficult without a producer to run through all of these comments and host this podcast for an hour. 100th episode today. I thank you. So last night I did some work, and I wrote down my returnee priority list, the guys that I want back, and I numbered them. And I had 7 guys that I would like to see return if the money works. Let's start with Mike Onwenu. Mike Onwenu has to be a clear number one on this list. With the offensive line the way it is, you have no left tackle, no right tackle. Your left guard just had surgery. Don't know if Cole Strange is going to be back by the beginning of the season. Have no idea if he's going to continue to get hurt. Again, one of the questions about Cole Strange when he was drafted was that he didn't have a big anchor, so to speak. The bottom end, the tuk-tuk, wasn't as big as usually the tuk-tuk is when we talk offensive line. All right? He ain't got the ass. And so, he's having a number of these injuries to his lower body. Is that an indication that Cole Strange is going to be injury prone to leg injuries, knee injuries, etc.? And if he is going to be injury prone, then now you've got no left tackle, no right tackle, injury prone left guard. David Andrews is getting up there. Sounds like he wants to come back, but Andrews is getting up there at center. Right guard, I think, will be City So. So when you look at this offensive line, you have to start the top priority with your own free agents, to me, is trying to get a Mike Onwenu deal done long term. And I know there's some questions about him, whether or not he's an offensive tackle. You're so thin, and he played well enough there. Then you go in and you say, sign him, put him at right tackle with a new offensive line coach, and let's see what that looks like throughout camp, throughout the preseason. Let's make this guy our right tackle. And if he's not doing the job, then we have to have a backup plan, because we know at worst, Onwenu is a top guard, a top offensive lineman in football. So I start with Mike Onwenu. My second priority, as far as returnees, Hunter Henry. I think Hunter Henry is important to this operation. You have 0 tight ends signed for 2024. Tight end has been historically a pretty tough, not always the case here in New England, of course, but when you look across the league, tight end is tough to develop quickly. Usually it takes those guys at least a year, if not 2 years, to find themselves at the next level. So, and this draft is not necessarily big on tight ends. You've got Brock Bowers, you've got Sanders, but you look at tight ends, it is not loaded with tight ends. That was last year's draft, but Belichick and company decided to pass. So you have no tight ends on the roster. I would bring back Hunter Henry. I would get Onwenu done. Then I would sign Hunter Henry. You need a tight end. He's a guy who has produced when the quarterback has played at a decent level. He's produced when the quarterback hasn't been good. His leadership, which Gerard Mayo brought up to Greg Hill, I think that means a lot when Mayo mentions publicly about Hunter Henry's, leadership. So number 1 on my list is Onwenu. Number 2 on my list is Hunter Henry. Matthew Zabin jumps in with a big-time super chat, $20. I appreciate you, Matthew. This is why Alt is a strong pick over quarterback. Historically, quarterbacks in the top 10 don't win Super Bowls, those not drafted number 1. I want to get into the quarterback conversation and where guys are drafted and what that has looked like. I actually did a ton of research on this about a week or 2 ago. I just haven't been able to get to it because of all the coordinator stuff, everything that's happening here in New England. But I do want to get to it, Matthew. I did some research as far as, the third quarterback drafted in the last 20 drafts. And I looked at a lot of different information, and I think it's going to be a fun podcast to do. I will eventually get there. I am a fan, Matthew, of if you love the quarterback, you draft the quarterback at 3. I think quarterback is too important that you can't screw around. If you love one of those guys, if you love Drake May or Jaden Daniels, then you draft May or Daniels. Whichever one you love, if they're there, you take that guy. To me, it's just too much of a risk to say thanks but no thanks to a quarterback that you believe could be a franchise cornerstone for 10 to 15 years. Because if you love a quarterback in the draft, that's what you believe. And if you believe you can draft one of those guys, if one of those guys is sitting in front of you, just waiting and salivating, come and pick me up, Pape. If that's what they're doing, then I think you've got to use that pick on a quarterback. But you've got to love them. If you don't love them, don't draft them. Because the worst thing you can do is like a quarterback and draft that guy at 3rd overall. I think that's a losing formula. Again, thanks for the super chat, Matthew. We'll get to the draft talk in just a couple of minutes. So, number 1 on my list, free agent returnees, Mike Onwenu. Number 2, Hunter Henry. Number 3, and this might surprise some people, Mack Wilson. I like the idea of Mack Wilson coming back. Now, if you look at edge pass rush, that's going to be an issue. Josh Uche is likely going to be gone. Matthew Judon walking into the final year of his contract. Mack Wilson has done a good job of getting to the quarterback. They've created this hybrid role for Mack, and a lot of that, according to Mack Wilson, was Gerard Mayo, and Mayo had a conversation with Wilson and said, look, we didn't use you correctly when you first came in. You're going to need somebody to come off of that edge and get to the quarterback. Even if you sign Judon to an extension for a couple of years, you're going to need that opposite edge player. Keon White is likely going to be an inside rush guy. Barmore, inside rush guy. So you've got Judon, but you need somebody else. And I would still draft an edge, by the way, not in the first 3 rounds. I don't want to see any defensive players drafted in the first 3 rounds. I'll lose my mind. But I do think you have to draft a young edge at some point. But you're going to need steadiness, somebody who has solidified themselves. And I like the idea of Mack Wilson being opposite of Judon with that pass rush. So that's what I would do. Miles Bryant, that might make many of you angry. Miles Bryant had a good year, and he has tremendous versatility. He has played a bunch of different spots for the Patriots in that secondary. I like his versatility. He's not going to break the bank. He's solid. I'd look to bring him back. Pharaoh Brown, I'd look to bring back and pair him with Hunter Henry. I'd also look to bring back Anthony Jennings. I don't think he's going to make a ton of money. Again, he's a guy who can play on the edge. He can play some snaps there. He can make a play or two on the quarterback, but he's very good against the run. Jennings popped this year under DeMarcus Covington. And I think, you bring Jennings back with Covington as the DC. It makes sense to me. And I'd also take a shot on Alex Austin. The Patriots need another boundary corner. And Alex Austin showed me enough last year with some physical skills, some traits, and he's got some size. I would take a swing at Alex Austin. So Onwenu, Henry, Mack Wilson, Bryant, Pharaoh Brown, Jennings, and Austin. That's what I'd be looking at. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Like, takes a second of your time. Comment and subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods. Rate and review. But every single like, subscription, comment means a lot to this program. All right, let's quickly get through the draft. We're probably going to go over an hour because I do want to slide some Celtics in. And there's just so much to talk about. And it's the 100th episode. Come on. Why not give you some bonus time here? But one final thing I wanted to talk about was the draft today. Pro Football Focus and Daniel Jeremiah released their top 50 and 75 prospects, respectively. Pro Football Focus did their top 75. Daniel Jeremiah did their top 50. Just some observations as far as Patriots-related needs. We all know they need a quarterback. We all know they need at least one wide receiver. We all know that they need an offensive tackle, if not two. So what did we learn from the Pro Football Focus and Daniel Jeremiah top 50 and 75 lists? When you look at quarterbacks, Pro Football Focus has 5 quarterbacks in their top 50. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Daniel Jeremiah has 6. So Pro Football Focus has 5 quarterbacks in the top 50. Jeremiah has 6 in the top 50. J.J. McCarthy is not in Pro Football Focus's top 50. McCarthy is in Jeremiah's top 50. Jaden Daniels. We've talked a lot about Jaden Daniels. Many people think he might be the pick at number 3 for the Patriots. Pro Football Focus, interestingly enough, has Jaden Daniels listed as their 11th top prospect. So Pro Football Focus has Daniels outside their top 10. That's very low compared to some other mocks and some other lists that I've seen. Meanwhile, Daniel Jeremiah has Daniels as his 5th best player on the board. So Pro Football Focus says Daniels 11, Jeremiah says Daniels 5. How about Michael Penix? A lot of conversation about Michael Penix. Had a terrible championship game against Michigan. Has had 2 ACL injuries and surgeries. Has had a couple of significant injuries to the shoulder. Pro Football Focus has Penix ranked 20th. Daniel Jeremiah is low on Penix. He has Penix ranked 40th in his top 50. So Daniel Jeremiah thinks that Michael Penix should be there in the second round. Pro Football Focus has him as a top 20 guy. And Penix is very polarizing because of the health situation that I just talked about. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Michael Penix on draft night. Caleb Williams and Drake May are both the top two for Daniel Jeremiah and Pro Football Focus. What about wide receivers? Well, stacked this year. Pro Football Focus and Daniel Jeremiah both have 11 wide receivers in their top 50. 11. Pro Football Focus and Jeremiah have 11 freaking wide receivers in their top 50 draft prospects. 1/5 of the top 50 for both of these lists. Wide receiver. So just so crazy deep. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, is the top wide receiver for both. And both Pro Football Focus and Jeremiah have Marvin Harrison Jr. as the number 2 overall prospect. They think he's the second best player on the board behind Caleb Williams. Jeremiah has Rome Odunze from Washington as the 3rd best player on the board. That is high compared to others that I've seen. Top 4 in a slightly different order. A lot of the same names. Marvin Harrison Jr., Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr., the other wide receiver at LSU with Neighbors. So those are the top 4 wide receivers. It is a deep, deep class. I will get to tackles in a minute, but first we have another super chat. Cool Genuine Phil says, "Sup, Nick? Go Pats, Celtics, and Bruins." Sup, Phil? I appreciate you. We will get to the Celtics in a couple of minutes. Tackles. Tackle class. Very deep. Pro Football Focus has 9 offensive tackles in their top 50. Daniel Jeremiah has 8 tackles in his top 50. Interestingly enough, Jeremiah doesn't have any offensive tackle lower than number 31 on his list. So he has a very top-heavy offensive tackle class. I think almost all of his guys are like in the top 18 or 19. Now, both Pro Football Focus and Jeremiah have Joe Alt as the top tackle in this draft. But it's loaded. So in a year where the Patriots need a quarterback, a tackle, and a wide receiver, you could not ask for better circumstances. The wide receiver class is just crazy deep. The best that we have seen in at least a few years. The offensive tackle class is loaded deep. Quarterback class, many people say deeper than usual. Now we'll see, because we've heard that in the past. But if you need a quarterback, wide receiver, or tackle, you have a plethora of options at those 3 positions. It is not crazy to believe that you can get a really good impact wide receiver in the 3rd round this year. It is not crazy to believe that you can get a starting tackle at the top of the 2nd round where you sit at 34. It's not crazy that you could draft one of the best wide receivers we've seen in quite some time with Marvin Harrison Jr. if you decide to do that at 3. I mean, this draft, in the areas where the Patriots need help, it is deep and it is talented. That's the good news. All right, let's talk some Celtics. Celtics escaped last night, 129-124. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Every like matters. Comment and subscribe. The 100th episode of the Nick Cattle Show had to throw in some Celtics. Celtics went 11-5 in January. They have a 4.5-game lead on the Bucks. And last night they win on the second night of a back-to-back against the Pacers and that explosive offense. Jay King from The Athletic posted this. The Celtics just completed a stretch of 15 games in 26 nights. I'm not a mathematician, but 15 games in 26 nights. It's insane. You're playing more than once every 2 nights. I mean, that's an insanely busy schedule. Absurd. During that stretch, the Celtics finished 11-4 with a net rating of nearly 9. I mean, I can't say enough about the Celtics, given this busy schedule in January, given how good the opposition was, the strength of schedule, to finish January at 11-5, to finish that stretch of 15 games in 26 nights, 11-4, with a net rating of nearly 9. You can't ask more from this basketball team. Extending the lead on the Bucks and the Sixers. Very, very, very impressive, given the circumstances. And last night, they were hot in the first half, shot almost 64% from the field, 57% from three. Tatum, White, and Holiday in the first half last night shot a combined 20 of 25. Shout out to Chad Finn, who had that stat he posted. I thought the Celtics should have hit the paint more in the final 2 minutes. They did a really good job of attacking the paint in that first quarter. Got away from it in the second quarter, but they were making their threes. So can't complain much about that. They were hot. But I thought in the final 2 minutes, they got away from that offense a little bit. They stopped attacking. Tatum took an 18-footer. He missed it. He took a step-back three. He missed it. Derek White took a three. He missed it. You had that ugly turnover by Drew Holiday at half court. So I thought they could have done a better job in the final 2 minutes of attacking that Pacers defense in the restricted area. They didn't do that consistently enough. And that's something that I hope when we get to the playoffs, I hope we are talking about a Celtics team that eviscerates the opposition in the paint. And we've seen that they are going to the paint more. They have improved. They're posting up more. They go to Kristaps Porzingis at the end of games with his post-up work. Tatum has been posting up more. Drew Holiday can post you up. So just keep attacking the paint. Don't get too comfortable. Everybody falls in love with this idea of, oh, the threes kill them. I don't mind the number of threes. I mind when you take those threes. And I mind the profile of those threes. If you're taking a bunch of step-back threes, I hate those shots. Low percentage, low efficiency. If you're driving to the paint and you're kicking, that's what we're talking about. Touch the paint, swing the ball, east-west, find the open three, take corner threes. Defensive rebounding last night was atrocious in the first three quarters. The Pacers had 25-plus second-chance points. Have to rebound the basketball. Have to rebound the ball. Much better defensively. I mean, the Pacers were just staying alive because of the glass. Second-chance opportunities over and over and over again. But I thought the Celtics played better in the fourth quarter on the glass. They limited the Pacers to one shot on most of those possessions, which was the difference. That's why you won that game. Concerned about Celtics defense a little bit. They gave up 77 points between the second and third quarters. Nembhard was penetrating into the paint all night long. They are a better defensive team than they play at times. And sometimes they lack the energy necessary. Sometimes they lack the urgency necessary. Sometimes they don't ball pressure as much as they should. They are a very good defensive team when they want to be. They've had way too many lapses from time to time here. And look, am I concerned? No, because I think when you get to the playoffs, teams focus. You're not playing every other night. You're playing against the same team. You've got a lot of scouting done against those teams. The defense usually ramps up in the playoffs. So I'm not going to go crazy over it, but I would like to see them not give up 77 combined points in the second and third quarter. And I know Indiana is a very good offensive team, the best in the league. So, you got to shut down the penetration into the paint. You've got to make sure that you handle transition defense. They did not do a great job at all times in the transition last night. They have not done a great job of finding shooters from time to time. And look, these are all nitpicks. Celtics are the best team in basketball. We understand that. But when we get to the playoffs, what matters is winning. And so they can't be a defensive sieve like they've been at times when you get to the playoffs. I don't think they will be, but they have to make sure they won't be. And I still think they have two clear needs. I still think the Celtics need a dependable wing that can play defense and bring more scoring ability. That's what I believe. Sam Hauser, fine as a shooter, better defender than people think, but you need more versatility at that wing, more athleticism at that wing, and somebody who has proven to come up in some big moments. That would be nice. And I'll still stand by this. A third big. I'm not comfortable with Luke Cornett in the playoffs. I'm not comfortable with Keita. You need a legitimate third big. Porzingis' injury history, Horford's age, those are the two things that I think they need. All right, I can't say enough about all of you. I appreciate it. I see all of the comments, all of them. Tremendous. The super chats, again, thank you. 100 episodes. 100 episodes in the books. Nick Cattle Show. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, rate and review. All of you mean the world to me. You have kept me afloat. You have kept me sane during a challenging time, personally and professionally. And for that, I can't say enough. Again, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. on the YouTube channel. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Nick C Radio right there. Thank you on this hump day. We'll be back tomorrow unless something breaks. Then we'll break it here and talk about it.